The Omen is a horror classic directed by Richard Donner, and if you haven't seen it, you might be surprised at how inventive and memorable its various death scenes are. But be careful when adopting a child, because you never know, he might just be the Antichrist. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Good evening.
And Tim, what's the name of that cat that just hit you in the face?
Oh, that's Damien.
How apt! How apt! Finally, this cat is relevant to what we're talking about. Welcome everyone, this is a horror movie podcast. It is the October-thon. We're doing a bunch of episodes throughout the month, more than normal, much more than normal. And this also happens to be episode 600 of Screams After Midnight. You might be thinking, why are we doing the Omen now? Why not wait until episode 666? Well, that was actually my plan. See, about this time last year, I realized, wait a minute, we're like in the 500s. It's not actually unfeasible to just wait until episode 666. But then, of course, as soon as I had that thought, they announced the first Omen was coming out, and we have to get to it while it's still relevant. So, in order to do...
Well, I thought we were doing the first Omen on today.
The movie that is titled The First Omen, not
gotcha.
The First Omen.
Okay. Okay, gotcha.
But yes, The First Omen came out this year, and we want to build up to that. So we're doing all of the Omen franchise this October, sprinkling it through the month. So this is the first of 6 movies in said franchise.
Yeah, similar to what we did last year, October. It's always nice to just, ram in one full, franchise. Last year we did Subspecies, and this year we're doing the Omen. So maybe we'll see which one is better.
Don't talk about them like they're equal. Come on now. We slummed it last year with Subspecies. You go back to previous October-thons, and we did like 1 October, we did all the Slumber Party Massacres. 1 October, we did all the Reanimators. We typically did 3 or 4 movies. This is actually a lot. 6 in one go is a hefty amount for 1 month. It's assuming we're mixing in a lot of other things, which we are, because it's October. We want to have a lot of different horror movies and stuff. But yeah, it just so happens that 600 was landing. So if we can't have this at 666, at least we can have it at 600 to mark the occasion. So here we are.
And hey, that leaves us with Children of the Corn 666 to do for episode 666.
Do you know what, Tim? I hate that that's probably the best option now. It probably is. Meaning we have to start the Children of the Corn franchise somewhere in the next 20 movies, just so that by the time we get to the 6th one... Because the last thing I want to do, Tim, is to get to episode 660 and go, crap, we have to do 6 Children of the Corn movies in a row. I don't want that.
Hey, maybe we can squeeze the first one in this October.
Okay, we've already mapped the month out, Tim. I mean, maybe we can. I don't know. If you want to squeeze it in, we can squeeze it in.
I left a secret day in that we can that we can do it.
Okay. We'll see. I mean, the October-thon always balloons a bit bigger than we plan for every year anyway. Every year it's like, okay, this is what we're doing. It's a little bit conservative, and I always think I'm doing it for Tim, because Tim's the busy one. Tim's the one with the...
That's true.
with the children. I'm sure he shaved their heads after watching this movie to check their heads for any mysterious birthmarks.
Yeah. Yeah, but we always do end up putting a lot out, but we're still gonna get some listener that's like, oh, why did they do this? Oh, it's Wednesday and I don't have anything new to listen to, but cram it.
I mean, we don't put our episodes out on Wednesdays, but it's... Well,
yeah, but they're gonna complain about it.
I suppose technically we do, because they got it on Wednesday on Patreon, but the public releases on Thursday.
Yeah. The guy complaining isn't on Patreon.
That's true. The whiny people don't join up Patreon. The good, nice people join up Patreon, like you, dear listener. But anyway, yes, there's extra bonus episodes this month. I'll mention that now since you brought it up, because it's October. But thank you for joining us, everyone. We'll start spoiler free like we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get the spoilers. If you are enjoying the show and you're on YouTube, please do hit the like button. Helps us out a bunch. And as we said, you can support us on Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the show. So, Omen, I feel like, Tim, it's been a while since we've done like a big movie. And, you know, like one that's like super famous and well known, and, you know, mainly because we've done most of those by now. But it's kind of weird getting into that conversation, you know, because...
I mean, we did Madam Web, but that was on the other show.
Yes, that wasn't on Screams After Midnight. But people can find that on Patreon. I'm not trying to keep plugging Patreon, but Tim keeps bringing up things that are only on Patreon. So often when we start these reviews, it's kind of like, oh, I need to explain what the movie is. But this is one where I'm like, I mean, I'm sure there's some younger people who are maybe just getting into horror, maybe haven't got to the Omen yet, who maybe don't know exactly what it is, and this will be for them. But it is kind of weird to, like, you know, here's a basic synopsis of the Omen.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's kind of funny. I was trying to think of, like, what the cultural footprint this movie has, because I feel like there's a lot of things that people know from this movie. Like, you know, Damien is just kind of shorthand for, like, an evil little child. And, yeah, I feel like, you know, like, I mean, obviously 666 is, like, a thing from the Bible, but I think this movie, like, really popularized it. And,
yeah. No one would know 666 if it wasn't for this movie.
Yeah. But and obviously, like, the nanny scene is like a big one, but I don't know, I still feel like this is one that doesn't get brought up a ton in, like, conversations when people talking about classic horror movies, or, like, I don't know if, like, more casual people, if they've seen this. And because, yeah, I feel like even people that aren't big, like, horror fans, they've probably seen, like, the Exorcist or something, you know, like that. But I don't know, like, I feel like a lot of people know this, like, through pop culture osmosis, but I wonder, I don't know how many people have actually seen it, or I don't know. I just feel like it's a very classic movie, but I feel like one that maybe doesn't get brought up enough as it should. But I don't know, maybe that's just me.
I don't know. I have nothing to add to that.
I don't know. Do you see people, like, talking about it as much as, like, other movies, or? I
mean, maybe not as much as, like, the biggest of the big ones, but I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. I guess I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. But it does feel like it's kind of in that echelon of big movies. And like you said, like, it has entered pop culture in this way, particularly the name Damien, the 666. Like, there are elements of it that have kind of just become part of just the lexicon of everyone, basically. Even if people who haven't seen it, which arguably may even be more impressive.
Yeah. I think maybe one of the reasons why I was thinking of it, and I mean, admittedly, you know, for me as well, like, you know, this isn't a movie that I watch, like, all the time, or I come back to maybe as much as others. And I was just kind of trying to parse out maybe why that is. But one of the reasons why I was kind of thinking of that is just because I feel like there's the nanny scene. I feel like it's a big one that people kind of take away from this movie. And don't get me wrong, I think that is, you know, a great scene, but I always forget when I watch it that there's a lot of, like, bangers in this movie. Like, there's a ton of, like, really cool scenes, and I always forget, like, oh yeah, like, this one, like, I feel like doesn't get brought up as much, or, like, I don't see this one referenced as much. So, well,
it just so happens, Tim, that about 3 years ago, I think it was, I did a top 10 deaths in the Omen franchise video.
Oh, really?
On the YouTubes, which is actually the first time I watched most of the sequels. I'd seen 2 before, I think, but that was the first time I watched 3, 4, and the remake. So, oh yes, I've actually suffered through all those before, which, you know, yeah, can't wait for round 2. But yeah, no, like, there is a lot of big scenes in this that are very, very... There's good deaths. I don't think when people think of the Omen, they necessarily jump to, oh, there's good death scenes. But there's like 3 or 4 in this that are actually really, really good. Like, some of the best there is. So, we'll get into all that. We'll talk about everything. Obviously, the basic premise of the Omen is that a politician who becomes the ambassador to the UK, played by Gregory Peck, Robert Thorne, he and his wife... basically have a son, right? There's a little bit of exposition at the start because it's not necessarily their actual birth son, but whatever, we'll get into all that later. But that son is Damien, and he might just be the son of the Antichrist, and that is
he just might be.
That is the plot of the movie. I mean, obviously, a lot of it's the slow realization that that's what he might be, and the mysterious things that are happening to people who are getting close to that information, or maybe getting in the way of Damien fulfilling whatever his life's purpose is. But we'll get into all that in a bit. But it's obviously there's a lot of things that come from this movie. I should mention the director's quite notable as well, because the director.
Mm-hmm. I always forget this.
Yeah, Richard Donner directed this, and this was before he did Superman. It's before he did The Goonies, before he did all 4 Lethal Weapon movies, amongst other things. He is a very well-known and a very kind of solid mainstream, but a very solid hand at doing mainstream movies. Like he's a good director, right? And it's funny because I think I made this point before in another video at some point, but I often wonder if like he never really came back to horror after this, even though his first big movie was a horror movie. And I just wonder if it's because he did everything that he could with it. Like he did all of his good horror ideas were done, and he's like, but I don't have to. Like I'll just diminish like what people think of me as when that genre. I said everything was left on the table. So he went on to do Supermans and things.
I mean, for a while he was thinking about coming back for Friday the 13th Part 7, but I think ultimately he decided against it.
Is there a reason why you picked 7 for that joke?
I just wanted a random, like a very, like, you wouldn't expect a big director to be doing the 7th film in a franchise.
No, you wouldn't.
Now, I must ask, is Richard still with us?
No, he passed away a few years ago.
Okay. I was going to say, there's still time. You can always come back to the community, Richard, but I guess time's run out for him. So. Yeah,
it was a few years ago. That was one that hit me a bit because he did direct a lot of things that I grew up watching.
Sure.
Not so much Omen. Omen I saw a little bit later. I was probably in my late teens when I first saw the Omen, but you know, like I said, Superman, Lethal Weapon, Goonies, like I was watching all those things growing up. So
I'm sure you read. You did a couple of DC comics.
Yes,
he wrote. So I'm sure you read those.
I mean, I think he's more well known for directing the first Superman movie, but yes, he did co-write one Superman arc with Jeff Johns. Yes, that is true. Are you happy? You brought that up. You got that in.
Yeah. No, I must ask: is Greg Peck, was he in The Birds?
I don't believe so.
You think with a last name like that he would have been?
I'm sorry. Have you got an issue that David Warner's in this movie, but it's not released by Warner Brothers? Is that also something you're going to complain about?
I was getting there. I was going to warm up to it.
Oh dear. Yeah. So run down the. Well, actually, I should probably just say before we get to that, Tim, what do you think of the Omen?
I love it. I thought it was great. Again, maybe I'm just trying to work through some of my feelings here because I do think it's kind of funny that it's like, oh yeah, how come I haven't seen this more? Because I probably only is probably my third-ish time watching it. I feel like I'd maybe seen it once before, and then a few years back I got like Shout Factory did a Blu-ray collection of the series, so I have all of them, which will be nice, except for the first Omen. But yeah, I think I did like a whole rewatch maybe a couple of years ago or whatever. And again, yeah, I just think it's like really solid. It's a very, competent movie with some terrific, scenes. I don't know. It's kind of funny that, like you were saying, like how maybe Donner might have just did this one and feel like he said what he had to say. And I feel like, this does so much, like religious horror stuff that I don't know is actually good that I just feel like I don't know, I feel like that there's not like a ton of like great religious horror movies. I don't know if a lot of people would like disagree with that, or maybe I'm thinking like the more modern ones, but they just feel like so generic and stuff. And it's kind of like refreshing when you see something like this. So it's actually like very good and captivating. But yeah, I just think there's like a lot of really good scenes. Obviously, the performances are good. The score is great. Has that very iconic like chanting and it's kind of funny. It kind of reminded me of
yeah, there you go.
I forget which specific scene it was, but it's something chanting really ramps up, and it reminded me of I'm sure there's a specific name of it, but like basically like the Sephiroth theme you get from Final Fantasy VII. I kind of wonder if there's any correlation there. But no, I mean, yeah, don't no complaints. I mean, obviously it's a classic, so it's feels a bit silly to be like, oh yeah, this is actually really good, but it's remembered for a reason.
Yeah, the Omen's great. It's the sort of thing where I saw it in my late teens. I liked it at the time, and then a long time went having not seen it, and then watching it again, whatever the next time would have been, it was like, oh yeah, this is a lot of things in it that are better than I even kind of like remember or give it credit for. And I've seen it a few times now in the last several years, so I remember it better now, and I remember the big beats from it. There's definitely a couple of little things that I still forget about, which I'll talk about in spoilers, but yeah, I think I feel like almost when you sit down and watch it, when you've only got vague memories of it and you don't remember the big, more bombastic kill scenes, you kind of, I think you go into it with this attitude of like, oh, it's going to be about a couple raising a child, and it's almost like it's been tainted by too many bad children in horror movies, like too many creepy kid tropes where it just sucks. And what's so funny is actually watching this is that Damien himself is not really, like, obviously he's focused on the sense that they're talking about him constantly, but he's not focused on the sense that we're constantly doing stuff with him. That he's not the center of attention in terms of actually doing things in the scenes, or like, he's there, he has to be there obviously, but he's not the, we're not doing the modern trope where we have to have the kids stare and like say something creepy at the adults and stuff like that. We were relying on things around him. In essence, they've effectively treated him as, no, he's a child, so he's not old enough yet to be being the creepy one. So he's got people looking out for him that are creepy.
Yeah, no, I love that aspect of it, and yeah, that's one I kind of forget about too sometimes when I go to watch the movie. That obviously he's like a presence and a force in the movie, but yeah, he's not like constantly in it. And like you said, they're not doing like these cheesy stereotypical things that maybe would make the movie feel like a little more generic or silly. And I think that's definitely something that works to it in its favor. But yeah, so much of the creepy stuff it like isn't actually Damien. It's like these other characters that are like on the sides watching, or like what they're doing for him and all this stuff. So yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, and a lot of these things we're talking about here, these generic things it could be doing, to be fair, I don't think they had become a thing yet, or were generic at the time, but looking back, you sort of see how this was sort of doing its own thing even years before other movies would turn certain things into tropes. It still avoids most of them, amazingly, which is just a sign that it wasn't following trends. It wasn't just doing something because, I feel like sitting down to direct a movie with this concept, with some of the ideas that it's got, just something as simple as we have to seriously talk about murdering a child at one point. Like, I can't imagine that was something that was, going down well with the idea of censors and the idea of whatever. So I think, yeah, it's kind of ahead of its time in a lot of ways, and I don't really remember the remake. It was very, very forgettable, but I remember it sucking, and I think when we do get to the remake, which will be the 5th movie on the list, I think we'll see we'll see what this material in lesser hands can be. But it's funny, like, you're talking about how like it doesn't seem to have quite as much as a legacy as a lot of other things, but to be fair, from like an IP milking perspective, it had a 1-season TV show that bombed. It got a 2000s remake. It's getting a nostalgia, more sort of like faithful sequel reboot in the first Omen. We've not seen it yet, so I can't describe it accurately yet, but it seems to be more of like a genuine attempt to try and like, rather than remake it, let's do something that honors it or whatever. I don't know. So
it had a first-person shooter on the Dreamcast. Do you remember that game?
I don't, Tim. What was the game called?
The Omen. Damien's Revenge.
Oh, so that's just, I thought it was a wittier joke than that. I thought you were remembering a game that had the word Omen in the title, and you were going to try and sell it to me like it was a tie-in to the franchise. But no, I wasn't even getting that from you. I'm getting this. I'm getting this sludge.
Yeah, and don't forget the short-lived Saturday morning cartoon show, Little Damie. That was good.
Don't worry, they'll keep milking, I'm sure. I mean, first Omen I think did all right, so I suspect there might be a sequel at some point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm excited for when we get to that one, and no, it's surprisingly like a pretty rich franchise. And before I wasn't trying to say that, that it hasn't had like a legacy or impact or anything, because I think it totally does. Again, I was just wondering why, like, I don't know, I don't feel like I see as many like horror people talking about it as much, especially when you start talking about classic horror movies, or at least just not as much in the sense of some other movies that get brought up all the time. So I was just curious why that is, because I think it definitely deserves to be in that what do you call it, like spoken about like other movies that people always talk about.
Get away with words, Tim. Well, an acute point made with such nuance.
Thank you.
Anyway,
I believe in not thinking before you speak. just start talking. Eventually, you'll end up somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're ready to go to spoilers for the most part, but I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I want to sneak in here before we do. But I don't think anything's coming to mind. So I guess we'll just we'll dive in more or less to the spoilies.
Jesus.
What? You don't like the word spoilies? Spoilers for The Omen. You have been warned. So yes, the movie opens at 6 a.m. on June 6th, 1966. That's not true. 1971, given Damien's age, for the rest of the movie. I think one of the things, and I'm just going to go into a whole like sub thing here. One of the things that I do often forget about this movie is some of the implications of the priests that are involved in like giving Gregory Peck Damien as a child, right? Because this priest tells him, "Hey, your baby was lost," and Gregory Peck's like, "Oh, my wife was going to be heartbroken. She wanted a child. She wanted, So he basically agrees to lie to his wife and accept this other baby who doesn't have a mother, who died in childbirth. But of course, later on, we find out that's not the case. There's more to it than that. I think I always forget that the priest talking to him at the start, and then Father, what's his name, Brennan, the one who comes to try and warn Gregory Peck later, that they are both Satanists, and later on it's like no, like he had a change of heart, and that's why he was trying to warn Gregory Peck about his son. He's like, "Hey, no, your son's the son of the Antichrist," and all that. I forget that because there's a moment after he dies later on where they find the 666 on him, and I went, "Oh, I forgot that. Why does he get the 666?" And then obviously as it goes on, and the other priest from the start later on, we see him, and he's all like burned from a fire, and he's admitted that he's trying to win back God's good grace because he turned his back on him for some years. Apparently it was elaborated more in like a I don't know, novelization, I guess. I don't know what to mention. When I was reading up about it, it said something about there'd be more detail in one of the books or something, but
interesting.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, yeah, this is actually quite interesting. There's this element of it which is these priests who are actually kind of the villains that raped a jackal to give birth to the Antichrist. Which again, it's not like super overly explained in the movie, but the pieces are there for you to try and put together should you wish to.
Yeah. wouldn't have been relevant when this movie was released. But I'm assuming this is probably some of the stuff we're gonna get in the first Omen. Like,
oh yeah, I hadn't even thought about it, Tim. But yeah, you're probably right.
we shall see.
We shall see. We shall see.
It's just these priests chasing this jackal around.
Is that the scene we're going to get?
Yeah. Trying to romance her. Like, hey.
Yeah, so they got a baby boy, and they have a happy montage of him growing up. Happy birthday to you, all that jazz. Also, we find out that Gregory Peck has just been appointed ambassador to the UK, so him and his family are moving to London. I got really confused about his job, actually, because they mentioned he travels a lot to other countries, and I couldn't help but feel like, but he's the ambassador to the UK, why is he going to Saudi Arabia for a meeting? I don't understand. Is it like they can't have an ambassador everywhere, so that, okay, the one in London has to like travel that entire side of the planet if there's anything needs to be done? He's the American they call. I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if there's something to do with like an American like travels to London but then gets kidnapped and brought to Saudi, like would that fall under his jurisdiction?
I don't know, because I have to assume most major European countries have an American ambassador.
Yeah,
I'd imagine France, Spain, Germany, so on and so on all have theirs. So
yeah, the big countries. Sure.
I don't know. It's just a thought I had, because they mentioned he travels a lot, and at one point he mentioned Saudi Arabia. I'm like, why are you going there? You're the ambassador to a specific country, so why is one of your duties to then travel somewhere else on behalf of the US? I don't understand, but someone can explain that to me in the comments if you happen to know.
Maybe the current ambassador will fill us in. I'm sure he's listening.
I'm sure. Yes, I'm sure he's a fan of the show. Oh dear. Also, he was roommates in college with the current president. They mentioned that here early on, to something worth knowing. I mean, honestly, it's kind of a speed run to get to the birthday scene for the most part, but there's a couple little things.
I kind of forget how early it feels like it comes, and I should mention too, because sometimes I'm like trying to figure out like, oh, okay, when am I gonna have time to fit in the movie just around my schedule or whatever, and when I was looking at the runtime, I was like, oh man, it's almost 2 hours. I was like, ooh. And then
you watched it at your son's birthday party.
I'll be right back. No, but I mean, it's not so much the length, but sometimes it's kind of like, okay, like, oh, is this gonna feel that long? But I feel like
that's what she said. Sorry.
But I feel like the movie moves like really quick. Like I didn't like it's definitely not like boring or anything really.
No, the pacing's a lot more. I wouldn't say brisk, but it's not this slow movie. Like I think you go into it expecting the pacing is going to be like The Exorcist for some reason, because The Exorcist is a slow movie, right? And that's not a knock on it, but it is a slow paced movie. This isn't quite as slow.
And I think it's like you said though earlier, like. You kind of assume, maybe if you haven't seen it before, if it's been a while, you feel like it's going to be a lot of them raising the kid and then like, noticing like weird things or whatever, but not wanting to admit it. But like stuff like ramps up pretty quickly. Yeah,
because there's definitely a version of this where it's more like Damien's just acting a bit weird, and it takes a long time for either parent to kind of start to notice anything or believe anything. Whereas obviously, they like when Gregory Peck is told your son's the son of the Antichrist and you have to kill him. Obviously, he can't just believe that instantly. That has to be something that he is convinced of. Harshly, repeatedly. There has to be no seed of doubt by the time we get to the final beats of the movie. And the movie does that. The movie gives him lots of reasons to believe it. But it doesn't do it in this way where he's noticing things with Damien specifically. It's more that he's being presented evidence and these weird things are happening. But it's more of an investigation movie, especially once he teams up with David Warner's character, the photographer. Once they're together, it's like, oh, this is a movie about investigating like a crime or whatever.
Yeah, and it almost becomes like kind of like an adventure, like globetrotting kind of movie.
Yeah,
which is fun.
Apparently, being the ambassador who flies a lot comes with some plane perks.
Oh, absolutely.
Like carrying 9 daggers onto a plane, which I'm pretty sure even in the 70s someone would have said no to that, but you know, maybe it was a private jet.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
You can claim diplomatic immunity.
Diplomatic immunity! I wonder if he has diplomatic immunity. He seems like the sort of guy that might, since he's an ambassador.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. He's like... Yeah. He seems to be integrating well, though. He's making bets on the local rugby matches with some other old British guy.
Mm-hmm.
He owes him...
That's what you do.
He owes him £3 later on.
Oof. It's a lot.
I mean, maybe in 1976 money it's a lot. It's not really a lot anymore, Tim. Not a lot that £3 going to buy you now.
I mean, maybe for you, Mr. Moneybags.
Oh, I'm sorry. What? Do tell what you can buy. What fortune of things you can buy for $5, Tim? By all means, because that's roughly what it translates to.
I could buy a month Patreon subscription to this fine show.
Good point. Good point. Good point. Good point, Tim. That's an excellent idea. They set up his job. They set up that they're moving, and they're all very happy about it. There's still a lot of romance in the marriage. They do a whole thing where they shut the blinds when they get to the new house, and he's like, "Let's go upstairs. I don't care that there's no furniture. Throw down your fur coat. We'll rough it like youngins." Right? All very sweet. But time moves ahead to Damien's 5th birthday party. And this is one of the most famous scenes in the movie. It's a scene that people remember. They might not remember the nanny staring at the dog and like the close up of the eyes as you get that sound that comes in. But everyone pretty much remembers the nanny committing suicide by jumping with a noose off the... it's basically the roof, but it's out the window on the top floor. I think what gets me every time I watch The Omen about the death scenes in particular is how well shot they are, because they look really good and they still look really good. Like the shot of like the body like going through the window as it you know hits the top rope, as it were. Like really good stuff. And then just the fact that she's not even scared, she's not whimpering, she just smiles and says, "Damien, it's all for you. It's all for you," and then kills herself. Which, I mean, as parents, what's going through their heads after she says that and then kills herself?
Great question.
I mean, how many nannies you been through yet, Tim?
I can't even count at this point. But yeah, no, it's messed up. And like, I think especially like seeing like all the reactions from the different, because it's not just like them at the party, like, you know, there's lots of like kids and stuff there. And then, yeah, it just feels like very real the way people are just like staring and like in shock. And then, yeah, it's, I always forget about how it like, you know, crashes through the window too. Like, just makes it feel like kind of extra brutal that it's not just like, oh, a quick snap and then she's gone. It's like, no, that's also like, you know, crashing and
it cuts back to her as well after that. So you just see her body hanging there, and it's like there's like a group of kids just looking up, kind of in shock, like, what do we make of this? We're children. How do we process this? It
really makes you like live in the moment, which is it makes it very effective.
Yeah, it's a very effective scene. I have no doubt that when we get to the remake, it'll be there again in a much inferior capacity. But here it's an A+.
Like a CGI rope, and then
there'll be some sort of like shadow, the shadow of Satan coming down to kill her, kind of thing. Whereas, I mean, to be fair, the implication here is that the dog like trances her into it.
Yeah, so I would assume that she's not a Satanist.
No, I think she has to die because they want to put their own nanny in the position.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's I've always read it. But this dog's a hound of hell, I guess.
Like, because especially if like you're trying to keep a low profile, you know, this isn't really the way to go about it.
No. I think this is just how brazen they are, though. It's like, no one will suspect anything. Who cares? Yeah. Doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah. And to be fair, like, yeah, I don't know. They do seem to let their guard down sometimes. Like, they basically just hire this nanny that, like, they're like, oh, I thought you brought her in. No, I thought you did. It's like, all right, don't you think someone should maybe double check that before just being like, oh, well. And
they say they're going to, because this woman comes in, she seems nice, and then both parents realize, wait, you didn't ask her to come here? No, you didn't? So they confront her about it, and she says, oh, the agency sent me over. which makes it sound like, oh yeah, like the other nanny was from an agency and then the agency just replaced her automatically. Okay, that sounds not completely ridiculous, but the wife does say, I'm going to, you know, just call and check that, but it doesn't seem like she does. Or if she does, then she must have got an okay answer, because nothing comes of it, nothing changes.
And to be fair, sometimes it'll take me like a week to return an email. Like, I know you get caught up in stuff.
Sure, but it's 1976. There's no emails here.
Well, I'm not saying that's what she's doing. I'm just saying, like, you know, sometimes you have a task to do and it should just be pretty quick.
Oh, you're saying she forgot to phone the agency?
Well, yeah, sometimes you just put it off and then, yeah, it leaves your mind or whatever.
I thought you were trying to imply she phoned the agency and the agency like, oh, we'll get back to you later. And then just
no.
didn't phone back or something.
No.
Okay. I get it. Right. Point's been made. So, obviously, this is your big bombastic star. It kind of alters the tone. And I think what's really smart about this is how it kind of knock-ons to the next scene and the next scene and the next scene, where Father Brennan shows up at the embassy to speak to Gregory Peck's character. And to be fair, he does himself no favors, because he sounds like a psychopath when he walks in, because he just starts quoting scripture and saying fire's a hell this, blah 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 that. So Peck's like, get some security. Like, he tries to entertain him, but he's like, okay, he's just not going to like say anything that makes sense. But then of course he does just drop a couple of things towards the end, which is that, you know, I was at the hospital the night your son was born, but he's not your son. And Peck even thinks that he's going to blackmail him or something, like, oh, this is like something you want to hold against me. But no, the priest just really wants to talk to him about who his son is, because he's got some pretty out there warnings to give him. And this is something that comes up. Notably, David Warner character, the photographer, he was at the party, the birthday party, and he's also taking photos at the embassy. He takes a photo of the priest as he's leaving the building, which is important, because those photographs are going to be a big deal. And it's funny how actually the deaths in this are kind of like a proto version of Final Destination. There's a little bit of that going on.
Yeah.
And even the photograph element's even a little bit like The Ring, that I'm thinking about it as well. You know, there's a few, you know, some seeds there for future horror movies to run with a little bit. But so they've got their new nanny. That seems to be going fine, although she does keep saying like things against them, like, oh, maybe Damien shouldn't go to church, it's not fit for him. And so there's a few times where the parents have to put their foot down and say, you work for us, we want our son to go to church, or we don't want a dog, or we whatever the thing may be. But of course, when they try to take him to the church for a wedding, Damien starts freaking the F out and screaming and crying to the point where they can't go into the church. They have to take him home.
I've been there.
So, yeah, all this is going business as usual. But I think one of the interesting little details that I think comes in at this point, which again I always kind of forget about, is that the wife actually starts to like get depressed, and we sort of find out that she's actually starting to feel something's wrong with Damien, that she feels like it's not her son, because we get like a scene with her therapist or doctor who explains some of this stuff and talks about how she doesn't want another kid. She she has this imposter syndrome with Damien. So you've got all that going on. And like it's interesting that whilst Gregory Peck's trying to be very logical, and he's trying to like talk this priest down whenever the priest tries to come and talk to him, he ultimately then finds out that his wife's already naturally having this fear that kind of links into it, which is enough to like give him pause. So when the priest says, hey, come and see me for 5 minutes and you'll never see me again, I think that's part of the reason why he accepts it, is because his wife's already starting to act like something's wrong. That's already something that's going on.
Yeah, this whole movie is just a big warning against adoption. Just don't do it. It's not going to end well.
I mean, that's a bad sentiment to put out there, Tim. Kids that need parents that are, orphaned, I feel like they should have a fighting chance. No.
I mean, agree to disagree.
I mean, I'm not going to do it. I don't want kids, but
I'm joking. Obviously, give all the kids homes. I say.
How generous of you.
But this movie's not doing them any favors. Let's be honest.
I mean, yeah, there's always that worry you might have got the son of the Antichrist whenever you get, and you get, you know, if it's not a Damien, it may be an Esther. You know, like you never know what you're going to get.
Oh man, Damien versus Esther. That's the movie I want to see.
An orphanage is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
Oh dear. Yeah, there's also a scene in here as well where she takes him to the zoo, and the giraffes all run away from Damien, and then the baboons all start like climbing over the car and like freaking out.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, the baboons, you know, kind of the heroes of the movie. Like they're the ones that are trying to kill Damien like from the start. Like if one of those baboons got in the car and just like wrung that kid's neck, like movie over, lives saved. You know what I mean?
Well, you say that, Tim, but technically he has to be killed on hollowed ground, and he has to be killed with a special set of daggers. So I don't know if it would have worked.
Well, I mean, what ground is more hollow than the zoo?
Now, admittedly, I don't know what happens if he dies some other way. Does he regenerate like Wolverine? I mean, I don't know.
Sure.
Imagine that was the ending to this movie. Gregory Peck takes Damien into the church. He pins him down. He has the daggers ready. He lifts up the dagger, but instead of the cops coming in and stopping him, you just hear snicked. And Damien stabs him in the side with his Wolverine claw.
Not bad. It would have been interesting for sure.
It would have been a twist. Also, Wolverine had not been invented yet.
I would say it must be either late 70s or early 80s that he appeared.
I think it's 78. I think it's Giant Size X-Men, which I think is like 78-ish. So I think it's a couple of years after this. Right. Yeah.
I mean, technically it would have been Hulk 180, 181, but that must have been around.
Oh, true. Yeah, I'm forgetting.
It can't be that far.
Yeah, you're right, but that may have been a year or two earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's right. I'm forgetting his first appearance wasn't in an X-Men comic. It was in a Hulk. The priest death, right? This is where we get super full on. Right. Well, I should probably mention what he says to Gregory Peck first. He says, "Hey, go find this guy. He'll tell you how to kill him." Also, your wife's pregnant, and Damien won't let the child be. And this actually, I think, ends up being one of the big convincing things in the whole journey for Gregory Peck's character. Is the idea that he's told that his wife's pregnant and that Damien won't let the child live. And then, sure enough, a couple of scenes later, finds out his wife's pregnant, that she doesn't want it, which makes him really want the baby to prove the priest wrong. And then, of course, Damien does his drive-by, we'll call it, to take care of the baby. And that's kind of like, oh shit, this is all coming to pass. This is all actually playing out like the priest said it would. So anyway, the priest death though, after Gregory Peck's leave,
this is gnarly. The
priest gets up and the weather itself chases this man. It's almost like Twister, where the weather's got a vendetta against this priest, and it chases him through like this tree area. There's a great shot here actually where the camera kind of comes up behind a tree and looks over the tree at him. Really nice stuff. But he ends up like climbing the fence into like a church like courtyard, and the weather's getting worse and worse, and then ultimately the final sort of blow, as it were, as the lightning strikes the spire or whatever it is at the top of the church, and it comes flying off and impales him. And this is
cool.
It's a great death. It's a great build up. Like it gets very atmospheric on the build up. It also has that great shot of him looking up, so you just get this close up of his face screaming with his hands up out in front of him. And then that final shot, even though it's kind of obvious it's not really impaled him, it's still a great, that final shot is great, where it's just like him just sort of standing there dead because the pole is holding him up, because it's sort of like made a triangle with him in the ground.
Yeah, no, this is really cool. It kind of makes you wonder though, like, if the devil, obviously, like devil, evil, hell, all this stuff exists, if this is like the Antichrist and stuff, but it's kind of like, okay, so God, are you just not going to do anything? Like, it seems like, you know, the devil's able to do a lot in these movies. God, you want to, anytime, you want to help out a little bit here? I'm sure you can do something with the weather as well to combat this. I don't know.
Especially since he's on the hollowed ground at this point. He's in a church courtyard, but I don't know. God's at his weakest here because we're in the time of the beast. Well, because you heard what the priest said. He said, you know, it's the something about the Jews going back to Zion, the rising from the river, two opposing sides at war, something like, you know, all the signs, all this. We're in devil times.
Yeah. I didn't realize it was literally like God was just like weak. He's just like up in heaven, like, oh, I can't do it.
Honestly, it's maybe a missed opportunity, and I don't remember the sequels doing this, but it is kind of a missed opportunity to not have like a. I mean, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think 3 kind of does something with this idea.
Well, on the one hand, though, I mean, obviously I'm making like a lot of jokes, but in all seriousness, I do like that this movie doesn't like really glorify Christianity, because I feel like that's a thing you get with a lot of religious horror, which is, I mean, you know, obviously I don't want to, you know, belittle anyone's beliefs or anything, but, you know, if you're not really religious, sometimes, you know, it's a little much when you're watching these movies and it's like everyone is always saved by the power of God, and like, you know, as long as you are a good Christian and you follow, you know, the Lord, then everything will work out and you can conquer the demons. Like, you know, like okay, that's the only way that you're able to fight this stuff. And I mean, obviously I get that, you know, that's a part of religious horror or whatever, but I feel like you see that a lot more with these kind of movies nowadays. But I like that you know, this movie doesn't really go there that much.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, part of the plot of Omen 3 is Damien, who's an adult at that point, is that
the Sam Neill one?
That's Sam Neill. Okay. I think part of the plot of that is him trying to kill any babies that might become the next coming of Jesus. Like the next, like his opposite, basically. Like there might be an opposite to him, so he's trying to like kill them all before they get a chance. I think that's part of the plot of that movie. But
it sounds interesting.
But it would be interesting to have like the counterpart in like a bigger way as like a sort of, it'd be a very different movie, of course. And I wouldn't want to end the first one by any means, but hey, it's interesting all the same. Because I mean, it's at this point where the movie kind of turns, because it's because I think it's actually just after this where we get the drive-by scene where Damien's on his little tricycle and he intentionally runs into his mom, so she falls over the banister. And even this I thought looked great. Like, there's like that shot of her falling down and sort of turning in slow motion. It cuts to the impact at just the right time. It kind of cheats it, but it never feels like it's cheating it in a weird way. It never feels like it's cut away from the impact, even though it kind of did. It's just really well edited together. But I love that there's a moment where she's not falling yet. She's actually just hanging on, and she looks right at Damien's eyes. And I think this is one of these things where in my memory sometimes Damien like either smiles or maybe like does something to help her fall, like he like hits her hand or something, and he doesn't. He just watches. He just watches.
I am king.
He just watches uncaring, right? Which is sinister in its own way enough, but yeah. But I love though, before he comes down the hall, he's like going in circles in his room, and the evil nanny is like watching him, and we get these close-ups of her eyes, almost like she's like, yes, gain speed, you know, vroom, 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 you're just speeding up, okay, unleash it, go, get her. It's like she's psyching him up for it, even though I'm pretty sure his speed would be the same if he just opened the door and went from there, because it's a tricycle.
Whoever apologies, I don't know the actress's name, but whoever plays that nanny did a great job.
It is Billie Whitelaw.
She's terrific as like, just very creepy and unsettling in the movie.
Yeah, I think when I did my top 10 deaths, I counted this scene because it felt like a death scene, even though technically it's not, because she survives.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you make an argument that this kills the baby, or
I mean, you could make that argument. I wasn't going to say that though, because I don't want to make it sound like I'm making some kind of political statement.
Right. Yeah.
Let me make it very clear: we are pro-abortion on this show.
Oh yeah, yeah. Everyone should get it.
Tim regrets not getting something.
If I had a time machine.
You know, sometimes Tim, like, is this joke too dark? Maybe Tim won't appreciate this, so I'm glad you enjoyed that.
I'll cry about it afterwards, but I'll put on a good face.
Okay, so obviously Gregory Peck's distraught. He goes to the hospital. He finds out the baby's gone. Right, this is the little shit's way of dealing with the child. Now, they never actually explain why the other child will go, or why the child can't be. Maybe there's like it'll like weaken Damien's power. Well, actually, I think the more logical explanation, this is something else the priest brought up, is that the unborn child will die, and then the wife will die, and then eventually he will die, but he will only die once Damien's sure to inherit everything that he has, his wealth, his power, his influence. So I guess that's why there can't be a sibling, because then that would be shared with someone else who's not the Antichrist, and we can't have that. The Antichrist has got to have everything to himself. He's a great little mother effer.
I like the further along you get into the movie, I like when you're kind of, it almost feels like, you know, like conspiracy theory or something, where like you're starting to kind of like link all this stuff together, like why this couple, and it's like, oh, it's not like this is all just random, you know,
there's a reason
stuff. Yeah, like I like that it all just feels really like extremely well thought out.
Yeah, once you get to the back half, not everything's over explained, but there's enough there to like piece a lot of it together. They want him because of his influence. They also, of course, when he starts working with the photographer character, they kind of start breaking down that passage from the Bible, and that stuff building up to like the rise of the Antichrist. And they sort of like kind of like adapt some of it into like what it might mean in a modern context. So, like, oh, two armies like on either side of the river at constant war. They kind of like determine that's politics. They determine that's what that is in the modern context. What was the other thing that says something about the industrial complex? I don't know, but they basically took everything that was in that little passage and kind of said, oh, that's how it technically is true now. This is how it's happening in the real world. And it's like, hey, this Antichrist will come from politics. And there's just this look in Gregory Peck's face where he's like, oh shit. Because his wife has a line at the start where she kind of jokes that she's married to the future president, and that sort of gives you an idea of like where his career might go if he was allowed to, like, you know, be a good ambassador for maybe, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, however long that takes.
Yeah.
Now he could go be president. Who was president in 76, Tim?
Oh God.
After Nixon. I don't know who came after Nixon.
It would have been too early for Reagan. Would it be probably not Carter? So, I don't know.
I asked because you're the American, Tim. I thought you'd know this.
What do I care about presidents?
I was just curious, though. I was just curious because we see sort of the back of the president's head at the end, and I was wondering, oh, who's that meant to technically be in the context of the year? Not that I'm saying they actually tried to make it look like who the real president was, because, you know, they don't usually do that necessarily.
Right.
But interesting also. But yeah, this is where David Warner's character really gets into it. We've seen him like develop his photographs, like sort of in little, you know, small scenes throughout. But he like calls Gregory Peck and says, "Hey, you need to come and talk to me." And Peck's got a lot going on, but he goes to talk to him, and this is where he's like, "Okay, hey, here's a photograph I took of that nanny before she hung herself. Notice the this shadow of a line going up from her neck, right? I just thought it was like a camera anomaly, something on the film, not a big deal, just a weird, creepy coincidence. However, here's photos of the priest. Here's photos of the priest a couple of days later, and this is how he died. And there's this line that's coming towards him, and it's like going through him just like the pole did. And it's like, okay, all right, this is very, this is proper predestination stuff. We're dealing with some serious shit here. And this is where they start delving into the priest and who he was. They find the birthmark because David Warner's got access to the coroner. Just don't question that. Just go with it. But they see his apartment and he's got like Bible pages everywhere, crosses everywhere. And this idea that he was dying of like some kind of cancer or something like that, and he was taking morphine multiple times a day. I think that's kind of the implication, is that he one of the reasons why he's trying to do something good is because he knows he's going to die. So like you get all that going on. So Gregory Peck's like, okay, he finally admits in front of David Warner that Damien isn't really his son, that his real son is dead, and that he doesn't know who he's raising. We have to. It's like, I need to find out whose boy that is. I need to find out where he came from. I need answers for all this. And David Warner's like, okay, I'll go with you. Let's go to Rome, where he was born. And he's like, no, I'll do it myself. And then he's like, no, this isn't just your problem. This is my problem too. And then he whips out a photograph of himself that he took by accident when he caught himself in the reflection. And would you believe it? There's a big line going across the photograph. So that gets him in there. So, you know what I really liked about all of this is that it felt like it brought everything together that we'd seen up until this point in the movie that was fairly separate. You know, everything all of a sudden came together. It made this secondary character like the second most important character in the movie, basically, alongside Gregory Peck.
Yeah, it becomes like a team-up movie.
Yeah. They both have understandable stakes. Gregory Peck wants to know what's happening to his wife, right? Like, he feels that she's in danger. He feels like he's been tricked into something with this kid. David Warner thinks he's going to die because these photographs have like led to deaths twice now. You know, that's a pattern. That's, you know, like everything just feels like it makes sense from like a character motivation point of view, and I always appreciate that. You know, even the idea that Father Brennan came to see Gregory Peck, he didn't just come to see him randomly. He came to see him because the whole hanging at the birthday party was in the news. He saw that happened, and he's like, oh, that's the first life Damien has taken. Not physically, of course, but the aura, the magical force protecting Damien is going to kill again. So, like, we have to try and do something about it.
I mean, I agree with everything you said. Like, this is a good way to, you know, I guess do sort of like, you know, an exposition dump. Again, though, like it always feels like natural, and that like you're on the ride with them versus, again, I mean, you know, how many times have we complained about, you know, worse horror movies where someone just goes to someone's house and they just like, you know, vomit up all this stuff, or they go to the library scene and they research the microfiche or whatever. Like, I don't know, this was actually like interesting and compelling for when they're like, you know, discovering stuff.
Yeah, and it feels natural in the sense that this journalist character, I mean, he's a photographer, but he's in journalism as a kind of a field. He's been investigating this because he's been noticing these weird things, and so he has some information, but a lot of it comes from, hey, look at this guy's place. This priest was weird. He wasn't just a priest who happened to know something was going on. There's more to it than that. He's deathly scared. He was trying to keep something out with having Bible pages and crosses everywhere. He was trying to keep some evil force away from him, like he's scared of it. Probably because he betrayed the evil force in some way. By then trying to like warn Gregory Peck about what was going on. Like, all of it just feels so natural. So yeah, then we go on this adventure where like, okay, we're flying off to go and try and find out where Damien came from and get to the bottom of it.
I'm kind of curious, like, what's in it for these Satanists, because I don't know, I feel like hell is not going to be a great place. Like, even if maybe you're like VIP or something, it's still not going to be like that cool.
I don't know, maybe I don't know. It's 1976. Porn's hard to come by. Maybe they all got free porn or something. I don't know.
That's fair. Sure.
I don't know, probably a lot of things priests are meant to have, right? There's probably like, here's a bunch of like sinning stuff. Here's you know, women, booze, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, they would consume when they get unleashed.
Lotto tickets.
Yeah, sure. Gambling. Yeah, that absolutely seems like something. Yes.
PS5.
Probably not
come out yet.
Yeah, probably not in 1976. But you know, like the idea of probably just living a life of luxury, I guess. Like,
Although, you gotta imagine though, like you're a kid in the 70s playing Atari or whatever, and then someone like just shows you like a PS5 for an instant. Like, there's not a lot you probably wouldn't do to get that.
That's true. If you'd only ever touched an Atari and someone showed you a PS5 game running on like a 4K TV, you'd probably be willing to kill people to continue experiencing such a thing. There's some truth in that. There's some truth. Joe, I think is interesting about this stuff though is this idea that both this character and the other one, you know, the priest from the start who we find later at the monastery, who's all burned, is that it seems like the only reason why they reverted back to trying to get back in God's good graces is because ultimately something bad happened to them. You know, one got cancer, this one seemingly got hurt in the fire and got heavily hurt. And it seems like it's almost like cynical that they don't really deserve much sympathy, because it feels like they only turned their back on Satan when it turned out Satan wasn't protecting them, that Satan was disposing of them however willy-nilly he wanted to.
It's like, oh, he lied to us? Like,
Satan lied? I know. It's hard to believe, isn't it, Tim? So, yeah, but they go on this adventure. They go to... Well, they try and go to the hospital where Damien was born, but that hospital burned down soon after, destroying all the records and everything else. And it's like, well, shit, surely at least someone was alive here, you know, that could tell us something. And the nun who's there is like, oh, like Father so-and-so, you know, that was his name, Spoleto. He's at this monastery. So they travel there. They try and speak to him. He can't speak anymore. He can kind of write with one hand. But the other priest explains that, oh, he's admitted that he turned his back on God and that he is trying to, you know, he'll get better one day when he's earned his, you know, he's done his penance. I'm not sure that's going to happen either. He's probably just going to die without anything happening if I'm going to break it to you. But he does write down, you know, Gregory Peck begs him to give him something, like, tell me where Damien came from. And he writes down a location, which turns out to be a cemetery, which they go to and they dig up. Proper spooky horror movie scene. You know, you got the dry ice, you got all the things. Eventually you got a bunch of dogs hunting them. But they do check the grave of what's supposed to be the mother of Damien, and all they find is the skeleton of a jackal. That's all they see in there. And then Gregory Peck wants to open the other grave, which is supposed to be the baby that died, right? So in terms of the grave, it's marked as her son, I guess, right? Because they switched the babies. Yeah. And he's like, hey, if we find an animal in this one, it means my son could still be alive out there somewhere. So there's this little moment, and I really like this, actually. There's this little moment where he gets a bit of hope that, oh, if he's not in there, then that means... he's out there somewhere. I have my real son's out there to find, and they just stole him from me. But when he opens the second grave, there's not only is it a baby skeleton, it's a baby skeleton with a big hole in its skull, and he quickly realizes, no, his baby's dead, but his baby did not die in childbirth. His baby was killed by these Satanists so that they could make the swap with Damien. That's your commentary. It's messed up.
It's messed up, bro.
I mean, I can't argue with you, but...
no, I mean, again, this is another, like, really good scene. Like you said, like, the atmosphere is just so thick here. I love how, like, just feels like classic horror movie stuff. And then, yeah, so, like, such a bummer, you know, what happens. But, again, though, I do like that it shows that, you know, that there's like this really sinister plan to everything that they're doing. Like, again, it wasn't just like a convenient, like, oh, like this person's child passed away, let's switch it. You know, it's like, oh no, like they were like from the start knew what they were doing, and they're doing like the worst thing like you could possibly do. Yeah,
they orchestrated it all. I think it's also a nice touch that David Warner, after they opened the first grave, was like, let's get out of here. It's starting to get kind of scary. We're hearing these dogs. And Gregory Peck's like, no, I have to open the other one. Because it really sells the personal element of the quest for him. Whereas for David Warner's character, it's just about kind of like proving to themselves what's going on so they can do something about it. And it does seem like, you know, next time we see them in the motel together, that, yeah, they're talking about going to, you know, see this guy in this place that the priest told him about, who can tell him how to kill the son of the Antichrist. But of course, something else big happens in that little section, which is the death of his wife. So he phones his wife and he says, hey, I want you to pack. I want you to come to Rome immediately. Don't ask questions. It's serious. And she's confused, but she agrees. She agrees to be ready for their friend to come and pick her up and take her to the airport and get her out of Dodge. He wants her away from Damien. At this point, he's really starting to believe that, you know, what everyone's telling him is true. And just as she's starting to get changed, and keep in mind, she's got a cast on one arm, so she's trying to like take off her blouse, and so she's really struggling. I love how this scene is directed, because as she's taking off the blouse, you can kind of see the faint like image of someone that has walked in the room, like through the material, and it's the evil nanny. And when she turns round and sees her through the fabric, she pulls down her blouse again, and we get the evil close up on the eyes. We get the close up on the wife's face as she's like scared for her life, and it cuts from there pretty much just as she's walking towards her. But we go to the outside, and there's like some nurses and stuff outside on a break or whatever, and we just see, or we hear the crash, and we see the wife flying down through the air, and she lands by going through the roof of an ambulance, and then the back door of the ambulance swings open, and she's lying there sort of hanging off the stretcher, dead. It's a beautifully done scene. It's also a little bit darkly funny, because I almost felt like, oh, the fall earlier on didn't quite do it, so we'll drop her from a bigger height. And that'll get the job done.
I think what's great about, and you can probably say this about like all the kills in the movie, is there's just that like extra level, or like that extra little bit of brutalness to them. Because I feel like a lot of movies, they would just fall on the roof of a car and that would be it. But no, it's like she's gonna fall through the like ambulance. Like, you know, she doesn't just land on the roof and thud. It's like she falls through, and then the doors have to open, and you have to get like that, like, you know, shot of her. So I don't know, it makes it always feel like just a little bit more of a gut punch, and again, just really yeah, kind of say it again, but like just really makes you kind of like live in the moment a little bit.
Yeah, and it's also actually just disguising the filmmaking behind it, because you can't, you know, the most obvious thing that would be fake is the thing landing, you know, the dummy or whatever it is in that shot. So by having it go through the roof, you hide the impact, you hide what the actual thud is, and then you have the doors open and she's lying there dead. It's like, oh, it really sells the illusion of what you've just seen.
Yeah, like there's never, like a lot of these scenes, there's never a time where it's like, oh yeah, I see the dummy. Like, oh yeah, that just looks like they threw, you know, some mannequin out the window or whatever. Like, it always looks like very, you know, real.
It's an interesting mix of still feeling pretty old school, but never feeling like there's an obvious tell. It's always really well edited to hide whatever the tricks are, which is very, very commendable. It is notable, though.
That's like, oh, sorry.
It's notable, though, that this is the only death in the movie that's committed by a person.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because all the other ones are all like a, you know, a force does it. You know, Final Destination death comes after them. But this is,
I guess, like,
oh, I suppose actually, arguably the hanging was caused by a person.
That's what I was just gonna say. Yeah, she does it to herself. But I mean, you could probably make the argument that she's under some type of influence or whatever. Yeah.
Whereas this is just straight up the evil nanny murders the wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. No uncertain terms. So Gregory Peck finds out about this. He's distraught. They're more motivated than ever to go and find out how to kill the son of the Antichrist. And they do. They find this town. They go and talk to this guy. I think what's really interesting is this guy. The way he like just kind of, he says, "Oh, is that sniveling little priest dead yet?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's dead." Like, I mean, that's not the exact phrase he used, but it was something like that. It was like, he clearly doesn't like Father Brennan. Like, there was clearly like a bit of a history there. But yeah, he explains the knives and he explains so and so. And I do appreciate that Gregory Peck's character is still not like, okay, a lot of bad things have happened. I am distraught about my wife. Clearly something horrific was done to us 5 years ago where they killed her son and they did all this stuff. But I still can't just stab a child, right? I can't just kill a child, right? He's still, you know, he's still adamant he can't do it. And he says, no, look, you know what? Whatever's going on, it's not his fault. He's not responsible for anything that's happening. So therefore, I cannot kill him. And he throws the knives away. And David Warner's like, well, if you can't, then I'll have to. And he goes over to pick up the knives. And this is where we get the best death in the movie. And we've had like 3 great ones so far, right?
True. Yeah.
Right? There's 4 deaths in this movie, and they're all great. But this one is a truck that's uphill, the brakes left, kind of supernaturally, or it gets bumped, and the brake's not on, and it starts rolling down the hill. This is like a pickup truck that has sheets of glass in the back, and it rolls down the hill towards David Warner, and when it hits whatever block in front of David Warner there is, the sheet of glass comes flying off and decapitates him and goes through the window behind him. So you get a satisfying crash. But I think the thing that everyone remembers, and the reason why it looks so good, the build-up's great, obviously, but the reason why everyone remembers it is because of the way the head bounces on the glass as he gets decapitated. It gets cut off, it jumps a little bit, and then bounces and rolls on the glass. So good.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. Again, it's just so refreshing to see something like this because, yeah, nowadays it would be CGI and it would not look as good at all. But yeah, it's just brutal. It looks great, and again, like all the other kind of deaths, like it gives you a little extra because yeah, it could have just sliced his head off and then cut to the next scene or whatever. But you see the bounce, you see the glass crashing into like the window and stuff, and so it just really is a phenomenal scene.
Yeah, I think it's also important that Gregory Peck's character sees it, because this is the final motivator. Like he's with this man has literally just said that he's going to kill Damien, and then a supernatural force immediately stepped in and killed him for it. This is like the final thing. Obviously, he still wants to be completely sure, and the guy did tell him, hey, he'll have 666 somewhere on his body. If you've not seen it on his body, it'll be under the hair. And that'll be his final little, like, okay, that confirms it 100%. But he was already about throwing the towel. He was like, I can't do it. I can't go through with this. And then this happens. It's the final motivator. And I think that makes sense, because if you're trying to convince a decent human being that they have to murder a child, you have to be convincing. It has to be like, hit hard time and time again. It has to be mountains of evidence where he is convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is doing the right thing by doing this. So it's so important that he sees this death. He saw the first death with the hanging. He is aware of the other ones. He's obviously greatly affected by his wife's death, but then he sees how brutal this one is, and how, because the first one, like we said, she does it to herself. So it didn't seem that, it was tragic. It was awful. It was traumatizing to see, but it wasn't something that was unexplainable. Like, you can hand wave it and say, oh, she was depressed, she was whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Like, it wasn't supernatural. This felt supernatural. The way all these freak accident elements all converged to cut this guy's head off. It's like, okay, that's it. Final motivator. Here we go. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I forget, but I'm assuming he showed him like the picture and stuff beforehand. The photographer. Yeah.
We mentioned that. Yeah, that was way back. That was before they left. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that's like more proof that it's like, okay, yeah, something like is going on. Like you can go back and look at those pictures and be like, yeah.
This is the third person in a photograph now who's died that matches the mysterious element that was in the photograph. Yeah. Yeah, we get this somber like plane ride back to London, and his car ride back there as well, and he has to slowly go back into his house, scared to go back into his own house. And he has to dodge the dog that's there. In fact, he actually has to trap it downstairs so he can go in and just check Damien. And yeah, we get this scene where he cuts Damien's hair a little bit so he can see the 666. He does see it, And then just as he sees it, that's when the evil nanny jumps on his back and tries to like stop him. And this is again, like at this point he's already convinced, but if he needed any more convincing, the fact that this nanny is now fighting him to protect Damien, because she keeps yelling, "Run, Damien, run!" Like, in fact, we never mentioned it earlier, but when she first like comes into the house and she first sees Damien, after she's talked to the parents, the first thing her tone and demeanor completely changes, and she says, "Don't worry, little one. I am here to protect thee." Like, you know, like she completely changes how she speaks. Yeah. It's really quite something. But yeah, so he ends up fighting her off, which knocks her head against the wall. She ends up jumping him again when he gets downstairs with Damien, and he ends up having to stab her with like a barbecue fork or something like that. It's like a barbecue fork and like a knife on like each like sort of side of her neck. But yeah, so he's in it now. He's just killed someone, so he has to be committed at this point. Oh yeah, you know? He's in all the way. So the final, well, not the final scene, but the final big moment of the movie is him carrying Damien into a church as Damien's yelling and screaming no, because he doesn't want to be in a church. We established that earlier, partly because he can be killed there. But he's pinned down. Gregory Peck works up the courage. She says, "God forgive me," and then some police show up, and of course this does not look good, does it?
No.
Right?
I mean, yeah, I hate to side with cops, but given what they know, yeah, this is not a great situation.
No, relatively just shooting from their context, I would say.
Oh no, I forget if they mentioned this, but so he gives them like 7 knives, right?
I think it was 7, yeah.
But does he have to kill him with each one, or is it just like, well, here's 7 in case you lose a couple or something?
No, I think he said he had to make a cross out of them. He had to like do like one, so 3 across the way, and then like the other 4 going down the way.
It just seems like so much work. It's like, I'm already killing a kid. Like, can you make it a little easier? Can
we get a little less traumatizing? Yeah. I have to keep stabbing him. So yeah, Damien is saved, and our final scene is the funeral for both Gregory Peck and Catherine Thorne, or Lee Remick, to use our actress's name, who's also good in the movie. Like, I feel like we haven't mentioned her quite as much, but she is very good in this.
Yeah, definitely, you know, doesn't have as much of a meaty part, but, you know, she's good whenever she shows up.
Yeah, because it's clearly Gregory Peck's movie. Like, he is the main character. He's the one that everything's revolving around in terms of, like, he's the one that needs to be convinced so he can take action. So he's the one that's got more agency, whereas, you know, if there's a small critique to be made, is that the wife character is kind of like, after she's put in hospital, she's just kind of like left off screen until it's time to kill her. And I love her death scene, and it makes sense from a plot perspective, but like that's basically the end of her thing. But yeah, so they give them a big funeral, and the reveal at the very end is that the president himself and the first lady are looking after Damien. And Damien turns, looks at the camera, and smiles as the chanting comes in. Like Damien's ascension to power, he's now effectively been adopted by the president. Like he's in the White House already. Like the plan's going swimmingly, Tim. Swimmingly, couldn't be going better.
That's good stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, we get the evil downer ending with the villain wins.
Yeah, and this kid, excuse me. The kid has a good like creepy smile too.
Oh sure, yeah. It's interesting though, because, you know, as Gregory Peck's like carrying him into the church and he's screaming, and I'm like, this is so weird. We're rooting for the hero of the movie to kill a child. Like, that's such a weird thing to wrap your head around, and it almost spoils the ending in a way, because you just don't believe they can actually do it. Like, you know, as a movie, like you can't really go through with this, and sure enough, yeah, he doesn't. So if in a weird meta way, it kind of like you just know it can't end that way. I mean, maybe it could now, but. I don't know. Like, it may just be a line that you can't. I mean, certainly can't show it on camera. It would definitely have to be like a, you know, cutaway kind of thing. But even then, like, do you want the audience like actually thinking about the fact that the main character is stabbing a child? Probably not.
No.
Even with all the context we have getting into the scene, it still feels kind of weird.
Yeah, I feel like most movies would probably do something where, like, yeah, instead of stabbing them, there's some type of, like, conversion or exorcism or something where the evil spirit leaves them or something like that. Or, you know.
Yeah.
I feel like that's maybe the more family-friendly kind of thing.
Yes, family-friendly. Nice family-friendly exorcism. It's really peppered with these great, masterfully done death scenes, which are all... They all don't skimp on the moment. They all feel nice and violent enough in how they happen, but they also all have great build-up. With the maybe exception being the first one, which is meant to be a shocking one out of nowhere, but the rest of them all have this kind of like build and crescendo to the moment of death. It's something that really, when I was doing that video a few years ago and I was watching them all looking for the deaths, it was something that really surprised me. Even in the first one was still full of great deaths. And not to spoil too many thoughts for later, the sequels, none of the sequels are good, but I will say that there is a couple of good deaths in the second one still, at least. So
okay.
Have you not seen the sequels before, Tim?
No, I when I got the box set, I watched through all of them, but
You've forgotten.
My memory's horrible. I don't remember much.
That is fair. That is fair. All right. Well, I mean, I think we're kind of at that point where I'm asking some questions. Tim.
Yeah. What's
your scene of the movie?
So this is actually really tough because there's so many good. I feel like the last couple of times we did this, it was like either hard because it was a movie with like no good scenes, or it's just like, you know, one or two to pick from. But there's easily a handful that you could pick out of any of these. Geez. It's I mean, obviously it's going to be a death scene. Those just have such an impact and they're so memorable, and there could probably be a case made for really each one. I will give a shout out to, if I was going to pick something that's like not a death scene, I might go with the baboon scene, just because I always love like animals, especially like primates and stuff in horror movies. And I just think that was like a cool, fun scene. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's really hard not to give it to the head decapitation scene. I actually do like the priest death quite a bit, though. I think that with the rod, that'd probably be a close second. But yeah, come on, the head rolling is just so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it made number one when I did top 10 kills of the entire franchise, so it'd be kind of weird to not pick it, unless I want to pick something that isn't a death, just to kind of keep it away from there. But I mean, it's hard because like they are these like great high points of the movie.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I think I'm going to just pick the same and be boring, but like, yeah, there's a lot of good options with this one, which is just a testament to how good it is. All right, here's an interesting one though. MVP of the movie, Tim.
Ooh, that is interesting. I did mention the baboons.
You can't pick the baboons. Must be a human being.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little tough because...
Actually, that's not true. It doesn't have to be a human being, but like, it has to be a character. It has to be someone who,
right? Yeah,
you know, you can talk about.
Yeah, it's kind of tough because, like we said, like a lot of the deaths and stuff are coming from like these unseen forces. So, I mean, I guess maybe you could say like just the omnipresence of evil or something.
Satan himself is the MVP for you.
I'll give it up for the nanny. I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the second nanny. I mean, the first one does a great job, but we don't get much of her.
We see her smile a couple of times, then she hangs herself. Yeah. It's really.
But yeah, that second nanny, she's just so good at being just so devilish. She has a nice little flair to the movie, like very creepy, ominous presence whenever she's around.
Yeah, thinking about it, like obviously you could easily go with Peck because this is the focus.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with David Warner, and maybe it's because I like David Warner, but I do think like
he's great. Yeah,
he adds this, you know, like as up to a certain point in the movie, the main character is just kind of spiraling in like sort of turmoil because it's like I don't understand what's going on, and David Warner just stabilizes everything into a nice structure once he sort of gets more involved, and I kind of like that as a character kind of purpose and dynamic. But, you know, I really like them working together. So, yeah, I'm going to go with David Warner. So, yes, shout out to my main man from Secret of the Ooze.
Love him. So good.
But, yeah. All right, Tim, it's time.
Yep.
Rate The Omen out of 10.
Well, it is tempting to give it a 6.66, but that wouldn't be indicative of the quality of the movie. But I think maybe I'll go ahead and turn one of those sixes around upside down, and I'll give it a 9.
Ooh.
Again, like I said, I've only seen this a handful of times, but I feel like each time I watch it, I'm more and more impressed by it. It's just, and obviously, you know, Donner is a very good director, so there's just a very, you know, masterful execution of everything in the movie. Like, yeah, it looks great, the acting's great, and the deaths are really, they're just all bangers. Like, you know, sometimes you forget maybe some of the less iconic ones, but there's like a decent number of them, and they all look really good, and they all feel very brutal, and there's a great sense of like dread and like hopelessness in the movie, and you know, it's very brutal, and yeah, and again, it's like never boring. Like, I never felt the, you know, the runtime or anything. Yeah, it's just a very well done, executed movie.
Yeah, I am going to go 8.5. For whatever reason, I just don't quite think it hits the 9 for me. It's excellent though. It's a great movie. Deaths are great. I think the motivation for the characters is there in a nice, natural way throughout the entire thing. I think it's a really good script in the way it flows from beat to beat, where even things that don't seem connected initially are kind of motivated by what just happened. And the more I've seen it, the more I've appreciated how it kind of follows through from scene to scene. Plus, there's some interesting backstory to kind of think about and theorize about based on what you get in the movie about the priests being Satanists and all that. Yeah. Super. And again, maybe we will get more of that in the first Omen. I don't know. Maybe that's what that's going to be about. Is yeah, that and the unfortunate assault to a poor innocent jackal who did not deserve what became of her. There you go. That is The Omen. We've started the franchise, and I mean, who knows, Tim? Maybe that 6.66 rating will be something you can apply to a sequel. Although, I'm not going to lie, I don't know if you're going to be hitting that high with any of them. And given that the first Omen's been getting a little bit of buzz and people are saying it's actually quite good, I will be disappointed if that only gets a 6.66. I'm hoping for a bit more with that one, but who knows? Maybe that's where it'll settle.
Well, I think that's what's fun about doing this is we kind of have, you know, something that we're actually building towards and looking forward to, like, versus, yeah, some franchise. I mean, you know, you watch the first one, you're like, oh, is this as good as it's gonna get? Like, this might be rough.
I mean, that's the thing. Before the first Omen, which again, we don't know how we're going to feel about that. We may not be that positive on it, but before that, the finale would have been the remake.
That's a tough one.
So, you know, and I do remember laughing at Liev Schreiber's acting in it. I'll say that much.
Oh boy.
That's the movie, everyone. It's the October-thon. We did a bunch of episodes. I do have a good idea of what the next one's going to be, but just in case the order changes, I'm not going to tell you. Because we're reviewing a ton of movies for October. We're recording a bunch early. I don't know for sure if the order is going to stay the same, so I'm not going to say what's coming next. Just know that within a couple of days, there'll be a new Screams After Midnight, and hopefully you'll have fun with it and enjoy it. Obviously, Omen 2 will be coming pretty soon as well. So it won't be next, but it'll be in the next 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I always look forward to October. Definitely, you know, one of the funnest months of the year. We'll have lots of stuff crammed into it, and you know, I mean, we're gonna have lots of, you know, stuff on the main feed, but you know, of course, if you're on the Patreon, we'll have a lot of bonus stuff as well. So it'll be a fun time.
Yep. So thank you very much for joining us. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. Let us know what you think of The Omen in the comments, all that good stuff. But that is us, so thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.